have you ever been in a situation where someone asks you, "So, tell me about yourself," and your mind just goes completely blank?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of those moments where you suddenly forget every word you've ever learned in English. Like, you know things, you've studied, you've practiced, and then someone asks that one simple question, and you just freeze.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this happens to native speakers too, not just language learners. But for someone learning English, it can feel 10 times more nerve-wracking, more stressful, I mean, because you're not just thinking about what to say, you're also thinking about how to say it correctly.
Right, and that double pressure is real. You're managing your thoughts and the language at the same time. It's like trying to drive a car while also reading the manual.
That is such a good way to put it. So today, we're going to break all of that down. We're going to look at how to talk about yourself in English, naturally, confidently, and in a way that actually sounds like a real person talking, not a robot reciting a CV.
And I think the key word there is naturally, because a lot of learners, and I've seen this so many times, they memorize a script. They prepare this perfect little speech about themselves, and then the moment the conversation goes slightly off track, they completely fall apart.
Yes, flexibility is everything. So Jake, let's start from the very beginning. When someone asks you to talk about yourself, what's the very first thing you should think about?
The first thing I'd say is know your audience. That phrase, know your audience, means understand who you're talking to and what they actually want to know. Because tell me about yourself in a job interview is a very different question from tell me about yourself at a dinner party.
That's such an important point. Context changes everything. Like if you're at a casual gathering, a relaxed social event, people don't want to hear your professional summary with bullet points.
Exactly. Nobody at a birthday party wants to hear, "I am a results-driven professional with 7 years of experience in..." Save that for the boardroom.
Please, save it. So let's say we're in a casual, everyday context first. Meeting someone new at a social event, or maybe a class, or just making conversation. What are the basic things you talk about?
So in a casual setting, you'd typically cover a few simple areas. Your name, obviously, where you're from, what you do, your job or your studies, and then maybe one or two things you're interested in or passionate about. That's really the foundation of any self-introduction.
And those 4 things, name, origin, occupation, and interests, they don't have to come out in that exact order, do they? Like conversation is fluid, it moves around.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be a formula. In fact, if it feels too structured, it can actually sound unnatural. The best conversations flow. They move from one thing to another organically, which means naturally without being forced.
So let's actually look at some language, because I think one of the most helpful things we can do is give learners real phrases, not textbook phrases, but things people actually say. Jake, how would you introduce yourself casually to someone you've just met?
Okay, so something like, "Hey, I'm Jake. I'm originally from Manchester, but I've been living in London for a few years now." That phrase, originally from, is great because it tells people where you started, and it also opens the door for follow-up questions. It's a conversation starter built right in.
Oh, I love that. Originally from, it signals that there might be a story there, and people love stories. They'll naturally ask, "Oh, so what brought you to London?" Or "How do you like it there?"
Exactly. And then you can answer something like, "Well, I moved for work, but honestly, I've just fallen in love with the city." That phrase, fallen in love with, doesn't have to mean romantic love. It means you've come to really, really enjoy something deeply. You can fall in love with a city, a hobby, a type of food, anything.
I fell in love with coffee in my early 20s, and honestly, it's been a committed relationship ever since.
That's a love story right there. But yes, using that kind of language makes you sound expressive and natural. It adds personality to what you're saying.
Now, let's talk about describing what you do, because this is another area where learners sometimes get very rigid, very stiff. They say something like, "I am a student," or "I am a teacher," and then stop. Full stop. End of sentence. End of conversation.
The conversational dead end. And the problem isn't the sentence itself. It's true, it's grammatically correct, but it doesn't invite a response. It doesn't give the other person anywhere to go.
So how do you open it up? How do you make it more interesting?
You add context, color. By color, I mean detail that makes it vivid and engaging. So instead of, I am a teacher, you say something like, I teach English to young kids, and honestly, it keeps me on my toes every single day. That phrase, keeps me on my toes, means it keeps you alert, engaged, always ready for something unexpected.
And young kids will definitely keep you on your toes. I can only imagine. So you're adding the what, but also a little bit of the how it feels. That emotional layer is what makes it human.
Exactly right. And you can do this with any job or situation. If you're a student, don't just say, I study business. Say, I'm studying business and I'm really getting into the finance side of things. It's not what I expected, but I find it fascinating. Now you've given someone 3 different things they could respond to.
That's a great technique. Give people hooks. Little hooks in your conversation that they can grab onto and pull the conversation forward. So you're not just talking at someone, you're talking with them.
Yes, and that distinction, talking at someone versus talking with someone, is huge. Great self-introductions feel like the beginning of a dialogue, not a monologue.
Okay, so we've talked about casual settings. Let's move to something a bit more formal, a job interview. Because the question, tell me about yourself in an interview, is one of the most common and also one of the most feared questions out there.
It really is. And what's interesting is that interviewers aren't necessarily looking for your life story. What they want is a quick, clear summary of who you are professionally, and more importantly, why you're relevant, why you're the right fit for this role.
So it's less about everything you've ever done and more about the most relevant highlights?
Precisely. And there's actually a really useful structure for this. It's sometimes called the present, past, future approach. You talk about what you're doing now, the present, then briefly touch on your background, the past, and then explain where you want to go or what you're looking for, the future.
Oh, I like that. It's logical, it's clear, and it tells a story all at the same time. Can you give us an example?
Sure. So something like, right now I'm working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company where I focus mostly on social media strategy. Before that, I studied communications at university, which is really where I discovered my passion for storytelling and brand identity. And what I'm looking for now is an opportunity to take on more responsibility and work on larger, more complex campaigns.
See, that sounds so polished, so professional, but it also sounds human. It's not robotic. And notice how Jake used, which is really where I discovered. That little bit of personal reflection makes it feel genuine, not rehearsed.
And the word passion? Use it carefully, but do use it. When you say you have a passion for something, it tells people this isn't just a job for you. It's something you care about. That matters to employers.
Now, something I want to bring up, because I think it trips a lot of learners up, is talking about your strengths. When someone asks, what are you good at, or what are your strengths, that can feel uncomfortable, especially in some cultures where being direct about your abilities can feel like bragging.
Yes, and that's a really culturally interesting point. In many cultures, talking about yourself too positively is seen as arrogant, showing off. But in many English-speaking professional contexts, especially in job interviews, being able to clearly articulate your strengths is expected. It's not bragging, it's communication.
So, how do you walk that line? How do you talk about your strengths confidently without coming across as arrogant?
A few strategies. 1, use evidence. Don't just say, I'm great at problem solving. Say, I've always been someone who enjoys tackling complex problems. In my last role, I restructured our entire reporting system and it cut our weekly workload by about 30%. Now it's not just a claim, it's a demonstration.
That's the difference between telling and showing, right? Don't just tell me you're good at something, show me through a specific example.
Exactly. Another strategy is to use slightly softened language, what we call hedging. So instead of, I am excellent at leadership, you might say, I'd like to think I have a strong instinct for leadership, or people have often told me I'm good at bringing teams together. It sounds humble, but still confident.
And that humility, that modesty, actually reads as very authentic, very genuine. People trust it more.
It's one of those cases where being a little less direct actually makes you more believable.
Now, let's talk about weaknesses, because this is the other side of that coin. At some point, in an interview especially, Someone might ask, "What are your weaknesses?" And oh, the answers people give to this question.
Oh, yes. My biggest weakness is that I work too hard, or I care too much about quality. Come on, nobody believes that.
Nobody. Interviewers have heard it 1,000 times, and it just makes you sound evasive, like you're trying to avoid the question. So what's a better approach?
Be honest, genuinely honest, but frame it constructively. Frame it means how you present or position something. So pick a real weakness, but one that isn't catastrophic for the role, and show that you're aware of it and actively working on it. Something like, I used to really struggle with delegating, handing tasks over to other people, because I wanted to make sure everything was done perfectly. But I've been working on trusting my team more, and I've actually seen better results because of it.
See, that answer does so many things at once. It shows self-awareness, you know your weakness, it shows growth, you're working on it, and it even sneaks in a soft strength, attention to quality. Very clever.
It's strategic honesty, and it's a skill in itself, knowing how to be genuine while also presenting yourself in the best possible light.
Okay, so we've covered casual introductions and professional settings. But let's talk about something a bit different, talking about your personality. Because sometimes people ask, how would you describe yourself? Or what kind of person are you? And these questions can feel very abstract, hard to get a grip on.
They really can. And I think the mistake people make is going straight to adjectives. I am kind, I am hardworking, I am creative. And while those words aren't wrong, they're also not very memorable or specific.
So what's the alternative?
Stories and patterns. Instead of saying, I'm a curious person, say, I'm the kind of person who can spend 3 hours reading about something I knew nothing about before breakfast. Now that's vivid. I can see it. I can relate to it.
That is genuinely me every Sunday morning. You fall down one Wikipedia rabbit hole and suddenly it's noon and you've learned everything about the Byzantine Empire.
The Wikipedia rabbit hole. A rabbit hole, by the way, means a situation where you go deeper and deeper into something, often losing track of time. It comes from Alice in Wonderland, actually.
Oh, that's a fun one, and very relatable in the age of the internet. So we're talking about using specific, concrete details to paint a picture of who you are as a person. That's so much more powerful than a list of adjectives.
And it also gives you something to talk about. Because if you say, I'm curious, the conversation might stop there. But if you describe a specific moment or habit that shows your curiosity, the other person can respond, ask questions, share their own experience.
Let's touch on something that comes up a lot. Talking about where you're from. For English learners specifically, this is a moment where they often feel vulnerable, exposed, because it ties into questions about language and accent and identity.
Yes, and I think it's worth saying, there's absolutely nothing wrong with mentioning that you're not a native English speaker. In fact, being multilingual is genuinely impressive. It shows discipline, cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch between different mental systems.
I always think people who speak multiple languages have a superpower, honestly. And many learners underestimate how much they already know. So don't hide where you're from. Celebrate it. It's part of your story.
Exactly, and you can incorporate it naturally. Something like, I'm from Brazil originally, and I've been learning English for about 4 years now. It's been quite a journey. That's honest, it's warm, and it's also a great conversation opener. People are curious about language journeys.
It's been quite a journey. I love that phrase. It suggests there were ups and downs, that it wasn't easy, that there's a real experience behind it. Much more interesting than just, I am learning English.
And if someone compliments your English, and they will, don't just say thank you and move on. You can say something like, thank you, I've been putting in a lot of work lately. Or, that means a lot. I still feel like I have a long way to go, but I'm enjoying the process. It's gracious, it's humble, and it keeps the conversation going.
Love that. Now, let's spend a moment on hobbies and interests, because this is actually where some of the most natural and enjoyable conversations happen. And it's where learners can really let their personalities shine, really show who they are.
Hobbies are great because they're inherently conversational. You have opinions about them, you have experiences, you have recommendations to share.
It's much easier to talk about a hobby you love than to describe your job duties in a second language.
So, what are some natural ways to bring up what you enjoy? Not just listing things, but actually making it interesting?
Start with what you're currently into, what's capturing your attention right now, because currently implies momentum, and that makes it fresh. So something like, lately I've been really getting into pottery. I only started a few months ago, and I'm terrible at it, but I absolutely love it.
And that self-deprecating humor, making fun of yourself in a gentle, lighthearted way, is so charming in English conversation. Saying, I'm terrible at it, but I love it, immediately makes you likable.
It does. Nobody wants to talk to someone who presents themselves as perfect at everything. A little self-deprecation goes a long way. It means a small amount has a big effect. It builds rapport very quickly.
And you can also share why you love something, not just what it is. That why is where the real connection happens. Like, I love hiking because it's the only time I genuinely switch off from everything. No phone, no emails, just the sound of my own footsteps. Now someone knows something real about you.
Beautifully put. And that kind of sharing, that little window into your inner world, it's what transforms small talk into an actual conversation. It creates a moment of genuine connection.
Okay, we should also talk about something that doesn't get mentioned enough. What to do when you don't understand a question about yourself. Because sometimes, especially in a second language, someone might ask something and you genuinely just don't catch it or don't quite understand what they mean.
And this is actually a really important communication skill, full stop, in any language. Don't panic, don't nod along pretending you understood when you didn't. That creates so many problems later.
Yes, the polite nod that leads to total confusion 10 minutes later. We've all been there.
Just ask for clarification, and there are very natural, polite ways to do this. Sorry, could you say that again? Or, I'm not sure I quite understood. Could you rephrase that? Or even, that's a great question. Just to make sure I'm answering the right thing, could you explain what you mean by... That last one is very sophisticated, and it buys you time to think as well.
Exactly. It's not a weakness to ask for clarification. It's actually a sign of someone who is careful, precise, and genuinely engaged. Those are all good qualities in a conversation.
And in terms of buying time more generally, if you need a moment to gather your thoughts, you can use filler phrases. Things like, that's a good question, or, let me think about that for a second, or, where do I even start? These are things native speakers say all the time, and they make you sound incredibly fluent and natural.
I use where do I even start probably 3 times a day.
It's such a good one, and it signals thoughtfulness, that you're taking the question seriously and giving a considered response.
Right. Now, let's zoom out for a moment and think about the bigger picture. Talking about yourself in English is not just a skill. It's a form of self-expression. And for a lot of learners, being able to express yourself authentically in a second language is deeply meaningful.
It really is. There's a concept that linguists, people who study language academically, talk about called the language ego. The idea is that when you communicate in a second language, you're not just translating words, you're navigating a slightly different version of yourself, and that can feel disorienting at first.
Disorienting, meaning like you've lost your bearings, you're not quite sure which way is up. Because you're used to expressing yourself in your native language with all its nuance and subtlety, and in a second language, you might feel like you're only showing a simplified version of who you are.
Exactly. And I think acknowledging that feeling is really important. It's okay to feel that way. It doesn't mean your English isn't good enough. It means you're a complex, nuanced person who is still building the vocabulary to fully express that complexity.
And it gets better. I promise it gets better. The more you practice, the more you actually have these conversations, the more your English self and your real self start to merge. You start finding your voice in the language.
And that's such a beautiful moment when it happens. When you say something and you think, yes, that's exactly what I meant. That's exactly me. It's incredibly satisfying.
Okay, let's bring things back to practical ground for a moment. We want to leave our listeners with some very concrete, usable language. So Jake, can you give us a kind of toolkit, a set of phrases that work across different situations when talking about yourself?
Absolutely. Let's go through a few categories. For introducing where you're from, I'm originally from, or I grew up in, but I've been living in for. Both of these give context and invite follow-up.
For talking about what you do,
I work as is fine, but richer options include I'm currently working in, or I'm in the middle of studying. That word currently, or that phrase in the middle of, shows momentum and energy.
for talking about your interests,
I've been really getting into is great for something new. I've always had a passion for works for something long-term, and one thing I really enjoy is a lovely, warm general opener that works in almost any context.
For describing your personality?
I'd say I'm someone who, this is wonderful because it shows reflection. You're not just stating facts, you're thinking about yourself. I tend to be is another good one. I tend to be quite organized, or I tend to overthink things. The word tend makes it sound honest and self-aware rather than absolute.
and for talking about goals or future plans,
What I'm really hoping to, or one of my goals right now is, or I'm working towards, all of these give a sense of direction and ambition without sounding arrogant.
these are genuinely gold. I hope everyone listening is taking notes, or at least saving this episode to come back to.
And the most important thing, and I really want to emphasize this, is that none of these phrases will feel natural the first time you use them. You have to practice them until they're so familiar they come out automatically, like muscle memory, but for your mouth.
Muscle memory for your mouth. That's going on a t-shirt. But it's so true. Language learning is physical as much as it is intellectual. You practice until it's in your body, not just your brain.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to practice is to record yourself. It sounds awkward. It is awkward. But when you hear yourself speak, you notice things you'd never catch otherwise. Filler words you overuse, phrases you stumble on, moments where you actually sound great and don't even realize it.
Oh, the recording trick is underrated. I know a lot of people hate the sound of their own voice. I think most people do. But it's such a powerful learning tool. Even just doing a 1-minute introduction into your phone every day is transformative over a few weeks.
Transformative, meaning it genuinely changes things in a significant way. And it doesn't have to be a perfectly polished recording. Just talk. Just practice the act of putting yourself into words.
And if you have a language partner, or even a friend who's also learning English, do this together. Introduce yourself to each other and then give feedback. What sounded natural, what felt awkward. It's low pressure and high benefit.
Low pressure, high benefit. I like that. It's a good ratio.
The best kind. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing, and that's confidence. Because you can know all the right phrases, you can have all the right vocabulary, and still hold yourself back because you're afraid of making mistakes.
And I think this is probably the biggest barrier for most learners. Not grammar, not vocabulary, fear. The fear of sounding silly, the fear of making errors, the fear of being judged.
And what would you say to someone who is in that place right now?
I'd say every mistake you make in English is proof that you're trying. And every person you talk to who is worth talking to will respect that effort rather than laugh at your imperfections. The people who mock someone for trying to speak a second language are revealing something about themselves, not about you.
Beautifully said. And I'd add, think about all the things you can already do in English. You're listening to this podcast right now. You're understanding complex ideas, nuanced language, jokes, cultural references. That is not nothing. That is actually remarkable.
It really is. And talking about yourself is just the beginning. Once you can do that, once you can tell your own story in English, you can start listening to other people's stories more deeply too. And that's where real communication lives.
That's where real connection lives. And connection is really what language is for, isn't it? It's not about being perfect. It's about being understood and being able to understand others in return.
Exactly. Language is a bridge, and every conversation you have in English, no matter how imperfect, is another brick in that bridge.
I love that image. Right, so to pull everything together, today we've talked about why tell me about yourself doesn't have to be terrifying. We've looked at how context shapes what you share and how you share it. We explored language for casual introductions, professional settings, describing your personality, your interests, your strengths, and even your weaknesses.
We talked about asking for clarification without embarrassment, using filler phrases to buy yourself time naturally, and we built a little toolkit of phrases you can actually start using today.
And we talked about the emotional side of all this, the vulnerability of expressing yourself in another language, and why that vulnerability is actually a sign of courage, not weakness.
Which might be the most important thing we said today. Because learners who push through that discomfort, who keep showing up and keep talking even when it's hard, those are the ones who make it, not the ones who wait until they're ready, because that day never quite comes on its own.
You make yourself ready by doing it, by talking, by making mistakes, by laughing at yourself a little, and by trying again. That's how every single fluent speaker got there, including native speakers finding their voice in their own language.
It's a universal journey, really. We're all just trying to find the right words for who we are.
And that is as beautiful a note as any to end on. Thank you so much, Jake, for being here today. This conversation genuinely made me think, and I hope it did the same for everyone listening.
It was a genuine pleasure. And to everyone out there, go practice. Go tell someone about yourself today, in English, even if it's just one sentence. That one sentence matters.
It really does. And we'll be here next time with more conversations, more language, and more of these moments where learning feels less like studying and more like living. Until then, keep talking, keep listening, and remember, your story is worth telling, in any language, but especially in the one you're working so hard to learn. Take care, everyone.